gravity. Since the dawn of time, man has always dreamed of mastering all that is beyond his control, going above and beyond, training to withstand the most intensive pressures, fighting the elements, and even taking to the skies. And while we may be used to seeing athletes on the glossy covers of magazines, few people know about what these people sometimes have to go through. Things don't often go to plan, and when that happens, we can only hope for a miracle. Today, we're going to talk about this one dangerous activity called paragliding. Specifically, we'll talk about a woman who can be considered the most fortunate in the world after climbing to plane-level altitudes due to unexpected circumstances. So high up in the air, she still managed to find strength. Let's start from the beginning. Ewa Wisniewska was born in Nysa in southeastern Poland. She, like many others, graduated from university and traveled the world. But it only took one incident to change her life and have her name etched into the tomes of history forever. One day, while at a mountain resort in Portugal, Ewa noticed the daring paragliders accelerating down ramps with courage and ease. The air currents picking up their wings, sending them on a lonesome journey across the sky. This sight inspired the girl madly, and it was then that she realized what her calling was. Pretty soon, Ewa discovered paragliding courses, and once she mastered basic skills, she didn't stop, setting her sights on becoming a professional athlete. Since then, the stubborn girl has trained hard and even won several amateur competitions. Ewa confidently went to participate in serious tournaments and dreamed of getting into her country's national team. Although the Poles didn't see any prospects in her, she soon received an offer from the German national team. Over the next few years, Ewa won many titles, but she could not have imagined what she would soon face. On February 14, 2007, the city of Manila, New South Wales, Australia, hosted about 200 of the best athletes from 40 countries, and Ewa was among them. There seemed to be nothing that could interfere with this grand event, but before long, the participants received information that on the day of their flight, there could be clouds gathering in the sky, as well as a good chance of thunderstorms. But having assessed all the risks, Ewa was ready to take the drastic step, as it seemed nothing could stop her on that day. After all, the skies seemed really clear, and after passing a few competitors who already refused to perform that day, Ewa got ready to fly. Things began quietly enough, and after starting a little later than others, Ewa, her Australian friend, and a Chinese paraglider were in the sky, but were soon completely isolated from the rest of the competitors. Their late start led them straight into a bunch of thunderclouds, while the rest of the competitors, having assessed the situation, were on their way down. The trio still continued to gain altitude, completely unaware of what was happening on the ground at the time. A confident Ewa was in the sky, figuring she could stay out of the clouds, but the situation was changing by the second. Small clouds quickly formed into giant ones, and soon the entire sky became a huge storm system. Ewa's teammates, who had already landed on safe ground at the time, were confident that they'd soon find her, but there was no news from the girl. One of the team members miraculously landed on a farm, ditched his glider, and ran towards the nearest barn, out of the terrible weather. He was well aware of the fact that his friend was in serious danger, as the Chinese team had found his comrade with numerous fractures crash-landed about 70 kilometers away from the starting line. This still meant 2 of the 3 had made it out alive, yet no one knew what had happened to Ewa. She was right to worry, for in those moments, Ewa was strapped into her paraglider, and the thunderclouds were lifting her upwards like a rocket. Once she was in a wind tunnel, Ewa prayed that the wind would throw her out of the cloud. Visibility grew weaker and weaker. Powerful gusts of air picked up the fragile woman at 40 meters per second, carrying her God knows where. She could only hope that her partners would be able to intercept her GPS signal, but she had no idea if her instruments still worked at that time. The organizer of the World Championship would later go on to say that the record height for human flight was 730 meters. But in those minutes, Ewa was already at airliner levels, specifically at an unreal 10,000 meters. This is a fatal altitude for any human being. Eventually, the storm system took her to the very top of the thundercloud, where she literally found herself suspended in the air. That wasn't the worst part, though, because the air temperature was about -50 degrees and Ewa's face, gloves, and wings were covered with a thick layer of ice, surviving such a situation is unlikely. And in the rare cases that survival is achieved, there would still be irreversible brain damage. It's no surprise, therefore, that Ewa quickly lost consciousness. This is probably the best possible outcome. The athlete spent a whole 40 minutes in this state until something cracked. As it turned out, the wing of the paraglider could not withstand the weight of the ice stuck to it, and as soon as it folded, the athlete started free-falling. It was as if someone had turned on gravity. Even though she was falling at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour, Ewa was still unconscious. This story would probably have finished here, and the newspapers would have published a story about the brave death of a courageous athlete. But a miracle just had to happen. The glider reopened, and after stabilizing her fall, a sharp jerk of the wings brought the athlete back to her senses. She was aware of what was going on, though the danger was still there in the cloud of thunder, and she couldn't move her joints due to severe frostbite. In the meantime, her team was scurrying around trying to get a trace, and messages from her friend who had managed to get in touch and explain what danger she really was in only added to the panic of the search team. Nevertheless, by some miracle in the midst of all this horror, Ewa still tried to control her heating, and grasping the glider's brakes with numb hands, tried to save herself from a seemingly hopeless situation, and that is what helped her. By then, the athlete had fainted several times, and each time she would come back for a fraction of a second. She also prayed loudly when she could. After an hour of unimaginable exertion, the woman was actually able to get out of the thundercloud. She still had to make an emergency landing 3 kilometers from the farmer's village, but that was not all. She lay on the cold Australian floor, shivering with cold, trying to warm her body. No one knew where she was or if she was even alive at all, and Ewa was well aware that no one would help her. So she scraped the ice off her GPS watch with her last strength. Before she passed out again, she managed to send out her coordinates. Fortunately for Ewa, her friends were able to quickly find her and administer first aid by wrapping her in blankets before the medical team arrived. Ewa's health was indeed a matter of concern. Her body was covered in bruises from 15-centimeter hailstones. Her limbs were badly frostbitten, and her ears seemed to be atrophied. Nevertheless, Ewa was still alive. Her health was no longer in critical danger after she was admitted to the hospital. After analyzing flight data, experts were in shock. No one had ever flown at that height before. Birds and airplanes don't usually fly that high, and here, this woman. Later, specialists discovered that passing out at an altitude of 10,000 meters, however strange it may sound, saved her life, because her unconscious state allowed all her bodily processes to slow down and let her heart cope with the insane load. At the same time, though, they could only throw their hands up in confusion, not understanding how something like this was possible. Going more than an hour without oxygen at extreme heights, at -50-degree temperatures, it almost seemed as if something from above helped her. Who knows what really happened, seeing as Ewa herself remembers almost nothing. Nevertheless, very soon the whole world learned about the incredible and rather inexplicable case of Ewa's survival, and journalists rushed to dub her the luckiest woman in the world, becoming famous for something other than her sporting achievements. Sure, she didn't do so consciously, but she did set a world record and had her name inscribed in history. Despite her unique flight, the athlete went on to continue participating in all kinds of tournaments until she stopped competing. Ewa's story once again proves the fact that there are many things in our world that can't be humanly explained, and no one really knows how limitless the human body is and how we receive help in these moments. Friends, what are your thoughts on this story? How did Ewa manage to survive? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. That's all for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you soon. Bye.